think that maybe this is another struggle that women have, is that we make it a habit of taking someone else's truth or trusting someone else's word more than our own intuition. And so usually I kind of internalize it and I'm like, is this true? This is true because they said it. And then I'm like, well, do I think that's true? Like, what's the proof that that is a true statement? So I kind of, all of this happens within like 10 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
And then I guess sometimes I'll go to like friends or call my mom, or my husband's like the best pep talker ever. He can speak life into anybody over and over and over and over and over again. So those are I usually go with them myself and then process it. And then I go to like outside, like people I trust, even you know, to really like encourage me, to tell me like, no, like that, what they said isn't quite fair. Or sometimes people say things and it's hurtful, but sometimes it's true, you know. Like my husband's really good about being encouraging, but he's also very good about being like, now you know what they said.
Yeah.
That's usually kind of what I do. And then, you know, it's usually it's very helpful and it keeps me encouraged, like, you know, moving forward. But sometimes like people say and do things that are very hurtful to where you have to keep it. Like for me, like sometimes it'll pop up in my head again, like when I'm already kind of like down, you know, like feeling down on myself. Sometimes I'll just like remember things that people have said, and it's like they just said it. And so I have to kind of keep going back to, is that a true statement? No, that's not a true statement. Or yes, they were fair in this, but I am trying. Like I'm getting better. I'm taking into what they said. And then sometimes I also have to tell myself, like, actually I do this a lot, where I'll say, the feelings I feel right now are valid, you know, like I feel them and I acknowledge them, but the feelings are not necessarily truth. And I say, like, in this moment, I can't see the truth. It's not very clear to me that those words were like me talking shit to myself, like negative self-talk isn't true. Like right now, I'll say, like, I can't, my mind's not clear enough to be able to know it right now, but I trust that tomorrow or in a few weeks or whenever, I'll be able to see clearly that those feelings aren't necessarily fact.
Oh, yes. Especially when you were talking about trusting other people's words more than your own. It's kind of like that idea, that the example that you said about celebrating yourself and then someone saying you shouldn't do it that way. It's kind of like, oh, what do I know? You know, or just walking confidently and no one telling you that you had a leaf in your head or something. And it's like someone else has to point out what I don't see. And usually what they say is truer because they can see me more than I can see myself, if that makes sense. And do we change that idea? I'm learning that this as well, even while I'm grieving, just continuing to see myself as human, and you know, there are no errors with being human. It's very interesting. I'm wondering, like, do you feel like our society is kind of going through this conditioning phase of like letting go of those barriers, or diving deeper into those traumas?
I think it's a couple of things happening. I think that there are a number of women, people of color, who we're normalizing and really bringing forth the unhealed trauma of our histories. I think that's partially what's going on. And I also think that it could be that there's a wave of people who are seeing the corruption of capitalism and are divesting. And I was having this conversation with a coworker about how, and she's white, so I think she can completely understand, but I was just like, for me, like, I still have my great grandpa who's like turning 100 years old next year, or is it this year? I think it's this year he's turning 100. And so the fact that we have somebody whose parents, grandparents, like directly were slaves, like, I think that his generation just kind of did the best they can. Obviously, like every generation does the best they can. But I think like our parents' generation was the one that was like working to have a nice house and this and that, and like have all of these like material possessions. And I think that our generation, there are people in our generation who are kind of like, but do I really want that? Like, am I working because that's what I want? Like,
yeah,
we're kind of flipping on its head, like really taking ourselves out of it and looking at like, we're told that we have to take this path and that happiness is in this and that and da da da. But like, do I really, like, I've even asked myself, like, do I even want to be on the hamster wheel? Like, what is equality? What does freedom look like for me? Because freedom for our parents looked different than what freedom looked like for our grandparents and what freedom looked like for my great grandpa and his parents, And maybe freedom for us now and freedom from anxiety looks like divesting from capitalism. That's a little political, obviously, but
yeah.
I think that, like, you're supposed to have a 3-bedroom, 4-bathroom house. Do I really want that? Do I need that? Like, what is it that I need to feel the most free and to feel the most at home with myself and in my body? Maybe it's not wearing makeup every day, or...
Yeah.
I think a lot of us carry anxiety because we're holding on, like I said, like to burdens and expectations that don't belong to us, that we don't have to carry.
What's very interesting, like when you word it that way, it makes sense, especially like just the idea that each generation is crawling out of a hole into the next level, like 2 generations before us, the goal was to obtain this American dream, and now, like, fast forwarding to the next generation, it was to create a family, and to have things to support the family, and then, or to just continue to work because we don't want to go back. And so with this generation, it's like, now that we're out of that part, now it's like time to address the mental traumas that we face. It's kind of, like us, like just slowly emerging. And it's very interesting to see how everyone is kind of starting to realize that the things that we see aren't actually real, or the images that we see aren't real. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very excited to see what like our kids and grandkids' generation of freedom, like what their view of freedom is. Because before it was just having shelter and, having food. To be able to be in a place where our generation can be like, I want emotional well-being.
Right.
It's a huge leap,
Yeah.
And to be in a place where you're like, we can be like, we want rest. We don't want to be on this hamster wheel of working and being, waiting until we're 65 and blah, blah, blah. Like, we want, like, freedom for us, many of us, is emotional well-being. And that's honestly a privilege. And it's a product of people who did come before us, setting us up so that we could have like a foundation of, we have food and shelter. What's the next kind of like Maslow's hierarchy. What are the next
Yeah.
things,
And now I'm like, I wonder, can we predict what the next idea of freedom is? Like, is it communication? Like, is it community? I don't know. It
Community
seems
would
very
be fantastic. Yeah. I don't know.
optimistic.
Yeah. That makes me very optimistic about the future. There are plenty of things to be like, the whole world is on fire. But when you do kind of zoom out to look at the landscape of history and the universe, and you're like, I'm in a financial place where my basic needs have been met, and now I can focus on emotional well-being and rest. That makes me very hopeful for whoever comes next.
Or even just like the idea of now I want to help others, because I have seen where like a lot of younger people whose parents like are at that position of power are now kind of rebelling against their system, their internal system, and doing things that are more interactive with communities, or even people who aren't on that socioeconomic level. And it's kind of like reaching down to understand that like community is wealth. It's not really the amount of things you have, and it's just that's a big deal, because if you think about just the idea of class, that has been like, the class system has always been established, even in like ancient times, and so for us to have this like cross generation of people who are now reaching to meet and understand people that have been kind of like X'd out of their lives, I wonder what the results will be.
Yeah.
Just like talking to people who people have just really walked over, like what kind of collaboration will that become?
Yeah. I'm interested. I'm excited to see it. I mean, I guess if the whole society doesn't collapse, we'll find out.
Right. Will we run out of water first?
Will all the forests be on fire before we get that?
Yeah, let's see.
I feel like you have to laugh to keep from crying.
At this point.